It's extremely easy to release or treat trigger points on yourself. Now in this video I'll show you 3 very effective home therapies. Arguably they work just as well as a professional therapy, but because you can easily do them on yourself, you can do them a lot more often, and that makes them a lot more effective. And so you can effectively apply this therapy, I'll quickly give you a rundown about trigger points, then I'll show you how to examine your own muscles to find them, and finally how to use each of the 3 therapies or releases. Now that's going to give you all the tools you need for most trigger point related muscles and conditions. Now once you've got that, there's a heap of articles linked in the description that go over specific muscles and trigger points for a range of conditions. Now let's get started with what trigger points are and how they're treated. Now very simply, they're those tender lumps in your muscles that therapists find. Now it forms a lump because part of the muscle is cramped or gone into spasm. Now as this diagram shows, that tightens the muscle around the lump, which restricts blood flow. Now with the blood flow restricted, the muscle doesn't get enough oxygen and suffers a build-up of waste. Now that becomes toxic, which causes the muscle to spasm more, and as you can see in this diagram, it locks on, continuously going around in circles. Now that's why trigger points behave like this snowball, gradually getting bigger over time. They start as small lumps you only know are there when the therapist presses on them, then eventually get big enough to start hurting on their own. There's 2 very important reasons I've shared this with you. Now the first relates to how we do trigger point releases or treatments, while the second relates to getting rid of your problem long term. Now looking at treatment first, when we do a release or treatment, we're trying to stop that cycle. Now you can see by stopping the spasm, relaxing the muscles and increasing blood flow will all help. That's why there are a lot of different trigger point therapies and releases. As long as it does one of those things, it should help. Now the second thing is that anyone who's had a trigger point release or therapy will know releases or therapies can give dramatic relief, but the pain and tightness always returns. Now think back to our snowball diagram. All any of these therapies and releases do is make the snowball a bit smaller so it doesn't hurt. Now if left, of course it will keep getting larger and start to hurt again. Now that's why most people get into a cycle of being treated, having the pain come back, being treated again, and this keeps going on forever. Now luckily there's a way around that, and I'll put the details in the description, but the core of it is you keep doing these releases or treatments over time so the snowball gets gradually smaller and smaller, and hopefully goes all together. So that's the background. Let's have a look at how you find trigger points and treat them. Now I need to tell you though that while these techniques I'll show you are fine for most people, there may be those they're not suitable for, so consider this as general information only and get specific advice from a professional familiar with your own needs. Now finding trigger points is very easy. Now I'll demonstrate on the forearm because it's easy to see. Now you start off with a general examination, and using the flat parts of your fingers work systematically so that you cover the whole muscle. Now what you're looking for is areas that are a bit tighter or a bit more tender. Now once you've found an area that's a bit tighter, a bit more tender, use 1 or 2 fingers to explore a bit deeper. Now for a start you're looking for unusual tightness, then within this tightness you may find a lump that's really tender and may shoot pain when you're pressing it. That'll be a trigger point. Now I've said that you need specific advice to make sure these therapies are appropriate. Now while you're there, I'd ask him or her to make sure you're doing the examination correctly and finding the things you should. You could even have them check that you're doing the therapy correctly. Now with the quality instructions I'll give you today and some professional advice to help you get started, I think you'll be able to do a fantastic job. Now the first home release I'll show you is called a pressure release. Now these techniques are very commonly used. Basically what you do is apply pressure to the trigger point while it fades. Now going back to how trigger points are treated, basically what pressure release does is disrupt the spasm. Now some professional therapists take this to the extreme and apply really painful pressure. But luckily clinical trials show us that it can be done quite effectively with moderate pressure. Today I'm going to show you 2 versions of this technique you can use. Now the first one is for muscles you can easily reach with your own hands. Now I'll demonstrate on my forearm because again it's easy to see. Now what you do is simply find the trigger point, Then using your finger or thumb, apply moderate pressure and hold until the pain fades or you feel the muscle relax, or for a maximum of 90 seconds. Now for parts you can't easily reach with your hand, you can use a tool like this. The thing though is that they have a hard tip and you can easily apply a lot more pressure than with your thumb or fingers. Now to reduce the risk of you hurting yourself, use a slightly different technique. Now what I want you to do is only use 10 seconds of pressure each time, but repeat each trigger point 5 times. Now before we go on to the next technique, I don't want you applying pressure with balls or rollers. Now I'll link the details in the description, but in my practice I saw so many people hurt themselves for so little or no benefit that it wasn't funny. Now the next technique I'll show you is combining massage with the pressure techniques I've just shown you. Now if we go back to our trigger point therapy basics, you'll see that this is more effective because as well as disrupt the spasm, it helps increase blood flow and remove the wastes. But you can only do it on muscles you can easily reach. Again, I'll demonstrate the technique on my forearm because it's easy to see. Now you start by lubricating the muscle. It doesn't have to be any special oil cream, it just needs to be slippery. Now start by using your thumb or fingers, apply moderate pressure and slowly move along like you're squeezing out an old sponge. Now because your veins and lymphatic vessels have one-way valves and we don't want to be forcing fluids the wrong way through them, it's important that you always work towards your heart. Now you work systematically to cover the whole muscle and you can use gradually more pressure to get in deeper. Now, that's a very effective basic massage technique. Now to combine the trigger point therapy, what you do is when you come to a tight spot or trigger point, you stop and hold the pressure for 5 to 10 seconds before slowly moving on. Now the last technique I'll show you is easily the easiest and the best, but you need proper equipment, which is a professional standard vibration massager. Now all you need to do with these is place the massager over the trigger point and leave it on there while the trigger point dissolves. Now if you have a massager with a proper ergonomically designed handle like one of these, you can easily reach and apply therapy to any part of your body. Now if we go back again to how trigger points are treated, scientists have found that when the vibrations penetrate, they attack the trigger point cycle at every point. They disrupt spasm, relax muscles, and they increase blood flow, which helps flush the wastes. Now I'll demonstrate again on my forearm, and I'll put a link in the description in more details. Now very simply, I find the trigger point, and I'll have some cloth over it so I don't irritate the skin, and I'll leave the machine on for 30 to 60 seconds. Now I can't make it much more complicated than that. Now one quick warning, don't think you'll be able to just pick up a massage gun and do this. Now, details in the description, but massage guns use percussion rather than vibration, which makes them dangerous and a lot less effective. Also because they haven't got proper handles, you won't even be able to reach about 1/3 of your trigger points. The good thing is you can get an excellent vibration massager for less than a lot of massage guns. Now links on how to choose one are in the description. So they're your basic techniques which will give you something effective for most parts of your body. As I said before, in the description there's links to instructions on specific muscles and trigger points for a variety of conditions. For example, there's articles on massage and trigger point therapy for back pain, shoulder pain, headaches, tennis elbow, fibromyalgia and a lot more. Hey, thanks very much for watching. It has been most appreciated.